A viewer sent me something from Guitar Center Hollywood. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. If you're not familiar with the Hollywood Showcase, they have so many really cool vintage guitars there, and I was actually aware of this guitar for like the past 6 months. But inside here, we've got another Spotlight to document. I apologize for having so many of these within the past couple of months, but this one was a complete surprise. He was just like, hey, got this coming to you. It's like, all right. Because he had just recently did that 1957 ES-175 in natural with me. But this one first surfaced around the same time that we did the RoboCat episode, because it was right after that Guitar Center's main head vintage buyer actually contacted me saying, hey, we just got this in. Are you interested? It was more money than I wanted to pay, so I decided to pass. But this is another one that has the high Gibson logo, and I was always suspicious that this had some water damage towards the back based on the photos I had received. So truth be told, I'm actually very happy to get to see this in person to see what is going on down here. It looks like it might just be a delamination of the lacquer. It is a little bit brittle in this area, so maybe it got close to a heat source or it was dropped, but I was expecting the finish all along this bottom edge to just be awful. Like there's another area right here that has a lot of that fine finish checking. It might have seen some light water damage back here because you can see a very similar phenomenon along the bottom, but honestly, I was expecting way worse on this. So far, I think it worked out for him. If you need to catch up on Spotlight history, these were first prototyped in the year 1982, but 83 is that first main year. Now, occasionally you will find an 84 or an 85 out there, but these were made utilizing tops from the Heritage series that were just a little bit too short for a full one, so they utilized some leftover walnut from the Paul series to create these interesting faux neck-through vibes, because they're still set neck like a regular Les Paul, but that stripe on the front makes it look like a neck-through construction. And I actually have a website called Gibson Spotlight Special.org where I've been tracking every single Spotlight that shows up online, either on guitar forums, Reverb, eBay, etc. And I do have quite a nice collection of these. You get the Antique Natural Spotlight Specials, and then there's Antique Sunburst. But within the Sunburst, there's a more darker hue, and then a more honey-like one. The Antique Naturals get the fancy headstocks and multiply binding, whereas our Sunburst friends, not quite as fancy, but you still get the nice quilty and or flame maple tops, and your walnut stripes running down the center. But this one's kind of cool because A, we still have the PAF patent applied for stickers alongside of our pickups. It appears to be original otherwise as far as the parts go, but I honestly didn't even notice this until he said it was coming my way and I looked at the old photos that Guitar Center had sent me. This one's been refretted, so I guess that's a little bit different. A Spotlight that has taller fret wire. Fantastic. I love my Spotlights, but the one thing I don't like about them is their flat frets. They're just not great for modern day bending. So if you're in the same boat as me and you have a Spotlight and you're like, should I refret it? Should I not? I guess this episode might help you with that. Now, unfortunately, our case is not original. This is early 70s. I mean, it's worth about the same. It's not a big deal. Unfortunately, I don't have any history. I would assume Guitar Center ended up getting this at a guitar show at some sort, as that's where Nick buys a lot of the inventory for the Hollywood store. All things considered, I'd say this case is actually in pretty decent shape. So let's go ahead and plop number 134 over onto the workbench, get it a nice deep cleaning as he's ordered, and then we'll go ahead and plug it in and hear how this one sounds. Three hours later, I decided to live stream this one. It's much shinier and in great condition, and I can give you a full report on our water damage spot. But let's start with our pickups like usual. Our neck pickup polished up beautifully, but you can see we do have a little area on the side where the gold has been worn through. And the date stamps tell us it's a September of 1983 Tim Shaw PAF. Doesn't look like anybody's ever messed with those covers. And then our bridge pickup, it's retained most of its gold and dates to 1 month later, October of 83. So that's a great match set. And as we were talking earlier, this one still retains the little stickers. I don't think all of them had it brand new. I could be wrong on that. But most times people would have just picked those off after they bought the guitar. But occasionally you'll still find it on. But if you ever see a rectangular reflective strip on the side of your pickup, it might have actually started life as one of these. Because as you can see right here, right above the patent applied for, it's starting to chip off because of somebody's picking around there. It just reveals the reflective coat on the other side. As far as our neck pickup, this is a very boldly stamped ASB, which stands for Antique Sunburst. And we've got the signature of Brenda. That would have been the girlfriend's name of the guy who worked on this guitar at that point in time. But here we can see where the maple top joins onto our mahogany body, as well as our center stripe of walnut right there. As far as our bridge pickup cavity, nothing too crazy going on there, but we can see more of the same. And our typical mysterious 3 stamper. But this is unique. You don't see this every day. It's like they didn't completely route the channel perfectly. There's a small little wooden ledge right there. I don't think I've seen that before. But now let's talk our controls. 2 volumes, 2 tones, as is usual. And we get readings within the circuit of 7.1 in the bridge, neck position 715, and the middle, just for fun, 356. So these are slightly underwound Tim Shaw PAFs. They generally range between 7.1 to 7.6. Now for our bridge and tailpiece, this also shined up beautifully. It's got a minor collapsing to it, but it should still play just fine. It's the original made in Germany Schaller one. Our tailpiece also is beautiful again. But now let's talk about the condition of the top, because that's what makes all the Spotlight episodes different. You see their history. So we do have kind of a deeper scratch / impression right there, as well as some mild ones as you run the light along it here. But they don't really get too bad until you see this ding right there. A couple of smaller ones. You've got one like right here underneath the tailpiece. Not sure if you'll see that too much when it's on. A couple of small ones there, slightly deeper in this area, as well as a couple over here. Got one tiny one right here, but I'm really glad that they never put a pick guard on this one, because this is the best spot of the entire 2 pieces. It's got such great figuring to it right there. This one really did kind of look plain in many angles, but it came to life. It's like, you have to hit it right here. This reminds me of one of my personal ones. There's photos that you can take of it where it looks super plain, and then there's the money shot where it's just perfect. But now let's talk about water damage. So, as the light reflects over it, you can see some vertical finish checking. That is stemming from whatever traumatic event this happened from. I texted Nick to see if he had any story behind this, and he said a guy walked into Guitar Center with 8 fantastic early 80s Gibson Les Pauls. In fact, some of those prehistorics I bought like 6-7 months ago actually came from that same guy's collection. So yeah, imagine that. At least 3 of his guitars came to me. But you can see where it definitely has not necessarily chipped the lacquer, but got underneath it and contaminated it a bit. Before the cleanup process, the entire bottom edge was just really hazy and not too nice. But now that it's cleaned up, we can kind of see what happened here. We actually have some rusting going on to our screws right here. So this was probably in a basement, sitting in a case. You know, something like this, it might have got some water and got some damage that way. But we can definitely see all this fine finish checking. There's some minor delamination going on, and that's always what scared me away from this example. But thankfully, it's not brittle at this point in time. Now, if you took some sandpaper, yeah, I think you could get it off. However, I had no issues polishing this. It's not like flaky, super coming off, but there was definitely a traumatic event in this one's life. But I would say a headstock repair or refinish would be much worse. It's still quite a beautiful guitar. You have to know to look for that, really. In my opinion, the worst thing condition-wise is actually over here. There's a really bad gash in the side, probably from something on a strap. But the rest of this edge isn't in too bad a shape after a cleaning. Just a couple of dings. But you know what? Now that I mention it, looking at this side, there appears to be another damaged area. See how it gets dark right there and you get all that finish checking? That looks closer to like a major impact that just didn't like impress it. So perhaps the guitar was actually sitting in the water like this. Because sure enough, goes from that edge, and we are seeing a little bit over here, just not quite as much as we were seeing on that other side. It must have been saved relatively quickly. So any previous owners of this one, feel free to chime in. I could be wrong. It could be something else entirely, but I would love to keep the story with it. But now we can move on from our 2-piece maple top and walnut center stripe with a mahogany body to our mahogany neck and rosewood fretboard. Whoever refretted this one did a pretty good job. Now, ebony tends to chip out a lot. This one being rosewood, you don't have to worry about that as much if you have a competent luthier doing the work. But what I was surprised about is it looks like they used the original nut still. Keyword, looks like they dyed it to seem the exact same. But if you come over here, you can see there's no finish on the edge, and it's actually slightly smaller than the stock one, so no, that nut has been replaced. But that's to be expected when you refret a guitar, because you gotta make up for the new height of our frets, and these things are pretty tall, and they were pretty corroded when we first put it on the workbench, so they're looking quite nice now. It measures 1.68 inches at the nut, 2.05 at the 12th, 0.82 first fret neck depth, and 0.93 by the 10th. I'm never sure if this reading's super accurate, but I think that's how tall the frets are. And then whenever you have a refretted guitar, you have to make sure that they retain the original fretboard radius, and in my opinion, no. No, they did not. They changed it from 12 to 10. So that could have just been a personal preference type thing, but this one does indeed now have a 10-inch fretboard radius. So a little bit more rounded as compared to your 12. So that's another difference between this one and all the other demos, but it's still a 24 3/4 inch scale. Here's a look at that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. Nice rounded C shape, almost getting close to a U. Now please keep in mind the Antique Sunburst ones. Last time we were talking, the Antique Naturals have 1-piece or 3-piece necks, and the 3-piecers are the bigger ones. The neck profiles on the Antique Sunbursts, so far from what I've documented, are usually pretty consistent, slim C to medium neck profile shapes. But now, moving on to the headstock, there was a point in the live stream where I just went silent, because I was thinking about these tuners. I was all excited that, hey, this one still has the original ones, but then I was looking at it, and it's like, you know what? No. Those aren't the original tuners. Do you see what's happened here? Go look at one of my other Antique Sunburst Spotlights that I've told you are original tuners. You see how small they are? They just barely bigger than the screw-on bushing, because they're not the complete vintage style one that's a push-on bushing. These are much larger. So I took one of the tuners off, and it doesn't look like there's ever been anything else on this as far as like a Schaller or a Grover. So somebody had to have put a different set of Klusons on here that matched the footprint. But then, in order to not leave this impression, when they restored it with an era correct looking set, they just left those washers on. That way you don't see the additional imprint. It could also be that weird freaky model type thing, variations within the run. But they changed the frets. They changed the nut. I'm pretty confident, these tuners are generally not that good. They've probably replaced them, because I think this might actually be a reproduction set. I would have to compare it to the other ones. But the no-line double ring is the correct style for a Spotlight. So if it is replaced, they did a good job getting the correct look, because these are hard to find. Here's a look at our truss rod. It's in perfect shape, works great. And we can see the initials of the person who filed the frets at the factory. Looks like MS. And we've got our original truss rod cover here. That's just blank. Now we can move on to the back side of the instrument. Looks pretty good until you get it into the discerning light. That's when you can see buckle wormings, impressions, indentations pretty much all over. Far from a perfect example, but it got played. That's why it was refretted. And you don't have to be scared to play this one out. Now our control cavity. So this one did not have a shielding tin over top of it. In my opinion, that does not look like factory solder work. So these pickups might have been in and out, or maybe the water event or whatever it is destroyed the electronics. I can say that that is a 19th week of 1983 pot up there. You can't quite read this one, but the other markings match. And these two down here also match with an 83 reading. So they're at least error correct, but we do not have a shielding tin, and somebody opted to have a regular grounding wire in exchange for that. And due to the fact that that runs underneath this pickup wire, that was definitely added after the fact. Sometimes you can find that stock from the factory as well, but that doesn't look right to me. Somebody has messed with the electronics just a little bit. Here's a quick peek at our toggle switch. Cleaned out all these electronics, so they should work great. But in case you were wondering, no, it's not one of the Leonard family signed ones. But we do have the thin binding in the cutaway, which exposes our maple top. Small lacquer line right there along the neck. And I don't remember explicitly pointing out that ding along the edge, so that's there too. Now we can move up the back side of the neck. Small impression here. Slightly larger one right there. Otherwise, it actually appears to be in good shape. But here's what it looks like with that tuner off. I don't see an imprint of a different tuner, but they could have just matched up beautifully. Or this new set is the one that has that. I'd have to look up a video of a different one that I tore it apart to comment for sure. But something just feels like maybe this is not the original set to this particular guitar. Not a big deal in the long run as long as you don't have new holes. But it is a custom shop edition. Number 83134, with only mild trauma up here in our headstock corners. And now the big question, does water damage show up under a blacklight? Well, let's find out. So far, everything looks good. Now in this corner, if you missed it before, you might see that, oh, okay, the lacquer's lifting a little bit and you've got some heavy checking, but it's not like glowing significantly different. I would say everything is good here on the front. Face of the headstock is also absolutely gorgeous. Flipping it over to the back, no monkey business here. not really seeing much of anything, even in our typical headstock brake area. The neck just has those couple of dings we were talking about earlier that helps you see it. It's kind of surprising not to see too much finish wear on the neck. You can tell it definitely has a little bit of sweat absorption to it, like as compared to the headstock here versus there. So it was played, but not too heavily. Now looking on to the back, things look good here. Just a little bit of something there. And those gouges we already knew about. And our other water speckled areas. So no, black lights don't necessarily show you water damage, unless you're looking closely for finish check. So now we've got it all strung back up, and what's my first impressions? Just noodling around a bit. Nice tall frets. That makes the Spotlight play a lot better. As far as the weight on this one, it's about average. 999s, 9 pounds, 9.9 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. There's some basic tones for you. Neck position. This neck pickup almost has a out of phase like tone to it. It's a little bit honkier than usual, I guess you could say. You hear it on those chugs. So there we go, Spotlight Special 83134 documented completely and nice and shined up. What are my final thoughts on this one? These Timshaw PAFs sound a little bit different than some of the others. Am I going to say it was my favorite Spotlight ever? No, but it has its own thing going on. That neck pickup, it is a little bit lower than I usually set them up. I didn't really mess with that at all, so you could experiment with that if you're looking for more traditional tones. But it kind of gave it its own unique, interesting flavor to a Timshaw PAF. These are definitely a little bit underwound. But as far as refretting, should you do it to a Spotlight? I will say, this one still feels familiar, like it still frets out a little bit, but you could do bends a lot easier without your finger dragging on the fretboard as much. So yeah, it's a shame we don't have the fret nibs, but at least it's not an Antique Natural Spotlight Special that have the multicolored ones. It's not as big of a deal to get rid of regular fret nibs on these guys. When I was filming the outside B-roll shots, I just happened to catch the sun going down, so you got that nice orange glow. And it even looks like the neck has some flame figuring in some of those shots. And you can really see the back come to life. And then, yeah, let's just take a second to appreciate those top shots again. This is a beautiful one, and I hope the owner enjoys it. Remember, this one was just sent to me. It's not one I purchased for my Spotlight collection. But maybe one day it'll find its way back to my set. But all right, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.